Thank you all for coming. I'm Sam Stein. This is David Plouffe, obviously. I had someone email me last night that if a year ago someone had told him that a Democrat would have trouble winning a Senate seat in Massachusetts, they would have been either institutionalized or locked up. What happened?
Well, I want to thank GW and the Progressive Book Club for having me. Start with a softball, huh?
Yeah.
Well, listen, there's still, 32 minutes in Massachusetts, so let's let people vote, and then, we'll see what the result is, and there'll be plenty of time to digest it. And I'll have a lot more to say about that after that. But I think generally, listen, the one thing, I've been in politics long enough to know that it's a very, very fluid business, and you are surprised all the time. This whole campaign I write about in the book surprised the heck out of a lot of people who, if you had asked them in 2005 if Barack Obama would be our 44th president, might have had the same reaction. Sure. So I think we'll see. I think that one thing that's clear is that, the electorate, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, you've got high unemployment. People are struggling out there. They're right to be angry. I think that what the president's done on the economy, I think will be already right now is one of the main reasons that we broke the back of this recession and we're growing again. Not enough jobs are being created. But I think as we look back on this, the tough things he did with the support of many members of his party, with no help from the Republican Party, fixing problems that were not solely because of the Republican policies in the past 8 years, but a big part of it is going to be seen as a big moment in this country. And I think we're still trying to solve some of the longer-term problems like health care, financial regulation, energy that have bedeviled this country for a long, long time. So, but people are unsettled, and they have a right to be unsettled. I think that campaigns matter.
Sure.
I think oftentimes in politics, and certainly in this town, people look at it as very macro, very atmospheric. Campaigns matter. And I think win or lose, Brown's run a very good campaign. And I think has really captured and tapped into that anger out there. I think his policy prescriptions are going to be seen to be totally wrong.
Sure.
So we'll see.
But why is the Democratic candidate and the party as a whole, I think you can judge by the data, having trouble tapping into that anger?
Well, I think some campaigns will be able to do it and some candidates will. Listen, I think, incumbent members of Congress have a great case to sell to the American people, particularly if we get health care done.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to that debate in the fall. Okay? So we'll have, listen, politics should be a comparative exercise. One problem is in Massachusetts is it wasn't a comparative exercise till the last few days. But the fall will be a comparative exercise. By the way, not the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party or President Obama versus Republicans. It's going to be candidates versus candidates. But I think in many of those races, there'll be a compelling case made, which is, okay, you can choose the Republicans who basically would do nothing on health care or did nothing on health care, basically protecting their patrons, the health insurance industry, take the side of big banks over the American people, after their policies and lack of regulation help contribute to the historic recession and almost depression we found ourselves in, who didn't do anything last year to help stabilize the economy, okay? And so basically want to go back to the policies of the past 8 years that got us in this mess, or offering no ideas, versus what we've done, which is we've taken tough steps, not easy steps, not politically easy steps, to stabilize the economy that is going to be the pathway to growth, tackling these long-term problems like health care and energy, which are going to be, listen, I happen to subscribe to the theory that if we do not renew ourselves, this country, at this very important moment, as our competitors in South Korea and in India, in China are strengthening in very important ways, we're not going to be as strong a country as we need to be.
Well, we'll get to health care in a second. I just want to just quickly jump in on mass on one more issue. I think once this race is done, and of course we have now 28 more minutes, there's going to be an examination of where the coalition is. And looking at the data, I would gather Democrats may not have a base problem, but they have an enthusiasm problem. And there's data points from Stan Greenberg and James Carville, two very trusted names in the business, that point out the fact that 46% of Republicans are intensely excited about 2010. Only 33% of Democrats feel the same way. We talk about the accomplishments that Obama has had under his belt and the obstructionism of Republicans to a certain respect. but it doesn't seem to be translating in terms of enthusiasm. How do you make up that enthusiasm gap, even if you've accomplished what you've said you have?
Well, we'll see where things stand in November. That's what matters. I think that, you've got historically the party out of power, almost without exception in recent times, we saw this, we had a lot of energy even during the Bush years. Didn't take the place back till 2006 in terms of Congress, but there's going to be a lot of energy on the other side. But I think the best way to help excite Democratic voters is to deliver and to help solve their problems. So let's go past health care. Okay? Let's really try and change Washington. The president's done a lot in the executive branch. Let's do a fundamental. Listen, a lot of people are frustrated out there. Democrats, Republicans, and independents. They think the special interests are the ones with all the voices. We got to make sure that people understand that we're trying to give the American people, the middle class, their voice back. The troops will be coming home from Iraq in the fall. We're going to continue to build on the really breakthrough stuff that's been done in terms of energy, jobs, and investment. So we're going to have a compelling case to make.
Okay.
And, there'll be a lot of analysis of Massachusetts, win or lose. I understand that.
Of course.
Some of it will be, I think, on point. Some will be excessive navel-gazing. But, we'll see. I think that what we have to do here is stay focused on solving problems. And if we do that and we lead with courage, I think we're going to have good electoral outcomes for many years to come.
Well, you mentioned health care. Let's bring it up. Now that it's in its critical stage, there's some in the Democratic Party, including Representative Anthony Weiner, a staunch progressive who's been in favor of health care reform up till now, who says, maybe it wouldn't be the worst deal in the world if the party didn't pass health care reform. It's either been too watered down or it's too toxic for us to handle. You seem to ascribe to a different notion that you have to build on these blocks. What is your message to people, both on the progressive and conservative side of the Democratic caucus, who tonight, looking at these results, are going to say, what is going on here with health care?
Well, first of all, everyone in Washington wants to view this through strictly a political prism, which I think is one of the reasons, by the way, that the country has not tackled these tough challenges. Okay? So first of all, let's do what's right. We have to pass health care reform. Well, we are not going to grow economically. We're not going to create the kind of jobs we need to. We're going to continue to have insurance company abuses. We have to get it done. And I wish more Republicans were participating. They're not. We have to lead. Okay? And my view is shame on us if we don't get this done. Secondly, the politics of this to me, which are secondary to what's right for the country and our families and businesses, the health care plan's been demonized. So if you run away from it, you're still going to get attacked for supporting a health care plan with none of the benefit. Because here's what's going to happen. When health care passes, every American has an interaction with the health care system. They're going to say, oh, really? Death panels? No such thing. Really? Medicare costs? Lowered. Donut hole, taken care of. Pre-existing conditions, no longer able to be denied. The truth and reality of health care is going to be a much more positive thing for the American people than the mythology the Republicans have created. So for us, again, the politics are secondary, but I think the politics are clear. We have to pass health care reform, and then we have to go out there, and we'll have a debate with the Republicans. Okay, so you wanted the insurance companies to continue to deny people coverage based on pre-existing conditions. That's what you voted for. You want to continue to have people's health care costs escalate 10, 11% without capping out-of-pocket costs. That's what you voted for.
You're sounding much...
Closing the donut hole.
Sure, you're sounding very firm, resolute, and I guess a lot of people here probably are wondering why isn't the president out there making as strong an argument as you have?
He's been making a strong argument on health care for a long time. It's one of the reasons that we're on the doorstep here. And
but he ceded the process a lot to Congress, and rightfully so. They got very far. They're at the doorstep. Do you expect him to take a firmer role now that we're there?
The truth is his role has been firm all along, and I don't think we'd be where we are without his leadership. And I guarantee you that when health care gets passed, and I sincerely believe it should, and then it will, a lot of these narratives will fall by the wayside. And, because listen, this issue has bedeviled our country for 100 years. And, we're spending twice as much, in many cases, as our economic competitors on health care. We can't continue to do this. And, I think that we get health care done both in the short term and the long term. It's going to be most importantly good for the country and our economy and our businesses and our families. But I think it's going to be good politics for the Democratic Party.
One of the things that was noteworthy in the explanation from the Coakley campaign, Martha Coakley's campaign, specifically their pollster, Celinda Lake, was that there was a perception out there that Obama was not doing enough to target Wall Street. I noticed that the president this past week, I believe, introduced the bank bonus tax, and it was well received among Democrats. But one question that kept coming up is, Why take so long to do this? Should we expect a more populist anti-Wall Street tone going forward? And do you think it's right to say that Obama surrounded himself with the same old characters of Wall Street, and that's hurt him in the realm of public perception?
What's important is what have you gotten done? And his steps on the Recovery Act, on autos, by the way, a very tough thing to do. I can assure you when we were sitting in Chicago in 2008 talking about the first year of the Obama administration, it didn't include bailing out the auto industry, okay? And the steps he's taken. And listen, I think when all is said and done on TARP, particularly if the bank fee plan passes, the taxpayers are going to end up, held harmless, which is remarkable if you compare that to what happened during savings and loans and the RTC back in a while ago. So I think what matters is the decisions that have been made, the policies that have been pursued. Have they helped stabilize the economy? There's no question they have. And I think they are going to help be one of the reasons that we begin to grow economically from an economic measurement standpoint, but most importantly then, trickling down to job creation.
One of the great accomplishments of 2008 undoubtedly was your 13 million strong email listserv. How is that being harnessed now differently than during the campaign? And would it be more effective if that listserv could target members of Congress? For instance, there's a lot of people who wanted OFA to go into Maine and campaign essentially against Senator Olympia Snowe to get her on board a health care bill. Same as in Nebraska with Senator Nelson, same as in Connecticut with Senator Lieberman. What are the differences between using OFA during the campaign and using it while you're in the White House?
Well, first of all, it's a way to communicate to people directly, which is important in the world we live in. Less and less people are sitting there reading the newspaper for an hour a day or watching television news or even reading political blogs. So it's a way to communicate with people directly about, the president's plans on health care, the president's plan around the bank issue. Whatever, it's a great way to maintain communication. So that we're big believers in there's nothing more valuable than a human being talking to a human being in your everyday life. Because people don't trust institutions like they used to, any of them. So, but if their neighbor or their colleague is informed about an aspect of the president's health care plan or an aspect of, back during the fight over the Recovery Act, those are very valuable conversations, person to person, and help maintain public support. Obviously, they've been out there aggressively communicating around health care, doing town halls, doing press conferences, talking to their neighbors. We think that's valuable. When we've had elections, we've seen in Massachusetts an enormous outpouring of support from OFA people. Now, activity alone does not generate support. You can make all the calls you want in the world, send all the emails you want, knock on all the doors. If the candidate in the race has not created that kind of enthusiasm or excitement, you're not going to have the payoff you want. But I think there's no doubt that OFA's work, along with just volunteers in Massachusetts over the last few weeks, and particularly in the last few days, has had an impact.
But that gets to my point about OFA, which is, in many respects, it was the perfect outfit for Barack Obama. He galvanized support. He recruited all these young members. He got these people to sign up for his election. And now when you adopt it to a legislative model, it's not the same. You don't have that singular figure or objective around which you can organize the masses. And is this a major problem for the Democrats?
No, listen, the truth is, we've had over 2.5 million people volunteer on health care.
But the health care bill it may not pass.
Well, it's further than it's ever been before.
Okay.
And I think the Democrats, in the Senate and most in the House have held together. And I think they see their support on the ground. So my view is any assistance that happens out in the country is positive. I also think it's good for democracy that these debates aren't solely on CNN or on political commentary sites. They're happening in schoolrooms and in diners and on farms for the first time in a long time with detail. So I think that, and we'll see, a lot of our folks were tired after the election. Many wanted to continue working. I mean, we kind of structured OFA based on the feedback we got from our volunteers. And they all wanted to stay in contact. Many of them wanted to volunteer. Most of them wanted the option to volunteer. Many want to get involved in elections next year. Some want to stay focused on legislation. So I think that, but a campaign obviously is different in the respect you've got deadlines. You've got the ability to go out and register 6 voters, raise $100, find 6 more volunteers. It's a little bit different in a legislative fight. You can still do the organizational building.
Sure.
So, you know, I think that I think those who think that you could wave a magic wand and have, you know, 5,000 people show up at a member of Congress's office and they'll vote differently, I wish it were the case. It's not.
You obviously are a sought-after advisor. A lot of Democrats are a bit peevish about 2010. If you were, let's say, candidate X is in the audience now, what are the 3 major points that he or she has to do in the next year if they want to sit soundly come 2010?
Well, listen, every campaign's different.
Okay.
You know, this book reflected the 2008 campaign, and I can assure you in ways I can't understand or articulate now, it won't reflect the 2012 campaign. So every campaign's different. You cannot have these blanket assessments. But I think every candidate has to understand their message, whether they're incumbent or not. You know, why should they be reelected? Why should they be elected? Their argument comparatively against their Republican opponent. And they have to have an understanding of how you get to 50% of the vote.
It's that simple.
Well, yeah. How much Democratic support can you get, do you need? Republican support, independent support. What are the turnout variables? You know, in a lot of districts and states in 06 and 08, you had huge turnout. So you have to have an understanding of who are these first-time voters? Who are these younger voters? Do I have a relationship with them? If not, how am I going to build it? Because I can assure you, the 15 million or so people who are new voters in 2008, think about that, they're not going to vote in a Senate race or a congressional race or a House race simply because President Obama asked them to or we sent an email. It doesn't work that way. It's selling people short. They're going to vote if they feel like they have a stake. Now, I think atmospherically, if we deliver on health care reform, we can say, listen, your vote mattered. Something that most people were deeply cynical could ever happen, happened. That, by the way, when Barack Obama talked about hope and change, that's what he was talking about. Getting something hard like health care reform done. Digging in on energy and making sure we're laying a good foundation. Taking on the tough problems. And so we can help in that regard, but then individual campaigns on the ground have to do the work.
If you were sitting here now, I know people hate putting predictions in print, but Michael Steele did it. 2010, will Republicans hold the Senate or the House of Representatives?
Well, listen, I think this prediction business increasingly, you know, you look back at all the predictions that have been made in the last few election cycles, and I don't think anyone would want to be reminded of them.
Fair enough.
My view is I'm happy to have this conversation in October. I think that, no, I do not think they'll regain either chamber. More than that, I think it would, you know, they don't deserve to. They would return us to policies that soundly didn't work. They'd be there to do the bidding of the big banks and the health insurance industries each and every day, not the middle class of this country. But no, I don't think so. That being said, we've won almost all there is to win in the House. Luckily, we have some open seat opportunities. So we've got a lot of tough turf we're going to defend, and a lot of people who won races in close to ideal circumstances. So they're going to have to run really good campaigns. Any incumbent is Democratic or Republican in this environment. So we've got a tough, historically, obviously, this tends to be a tough time, the first election after a new president. So, you know, I'm not suggesting that everything is going to be a glide path. We're going to have some tough races out there. And we got a lot more ground to defend in the House and Senate and in the governor's races than the Republicans. Sure. But no, I think that you know, we're going to maintain control of both of those chambers. I have every belief. And we're going to have to work really hard to do it. And, you know, the lesson is, listen, nobody can take anything for granted out there. I think this goes for the Republicans, too. You know, if you're on the ballot in a time of high unemployment with economic anxiety, you know, you're going to have to run a really campaign and really run a really strong campaign you know, take every moment of your campaign very seriously.
I have one more question until audience. And I have to ask this, it's a little navel-gazing, as you like to say, but I noticed from the pages of your book that your opinion of the political press is quite low. You called us jackals. You said we're always looking for conflict and potential gaffes. And you claimed that the press nearly soiled themselves with excitement over the 3 a.m. ad. Fair enough. One, how am I doing? No. But honestly, what are your major beefs with the press, and what would you like to see differently? I know that it's common to say there's too much horse race drama, but surely there has to be some good journalism out there, right? And do you see the future of journalism increasingly going towards the online world where it's quick bits and maybe a little less time to stew over a story?
Well, listen, I think obviously journalism has played an extraordinarily important role in the future of in the history of our country, but also in the history of our politics. And, you know, I think that you still have a lot of Americans who look to, whether it's online, print, TV, radio, you know, that's how they get their information. And I think one important role, and I'm worried about this, you know, if you look at nationally, but probably even more importantly locally, state houses, city halls, the investigative journalism that's been done by the news media has uncovered a lot of scandals, I think helps keep elected officials and other business leaders honest. And I am worried that, you know, less of that's being done because of the economics of the news media. So I'm worried about that. So, you know, their role is critically important. My point is that I think a lot of the political coverage does tend to be like baseball box scores. You know, who made the error, who won or lost, every day is treated like the most important day. And I think sometimes there's a lack of perspective. You know, I think that, so I think there's a balance. There's obviously an appetite for that. And so that, I think, needs to be filled. But at the same time, I mean, it's the prediction thing. I mean, in the campaign, and I write a lot about this, I mean, in many days, I felt we were running a different campaign than the one that was being covered. In terms of what we valued as important. What were the metrics that mattered to us? And oftentimes it's covered well if you put a clever ad out in a campaign, even an ad that's not run, so nobody sees it really, and the commentators are all talking about it. You know, most news, I think a lot of political commentators would say, hey, you had a good day. But what is that's, you know, that's not evaluating, okay, what kind of progress did you make with the electorate you need to win in your state or your district today? And so, you know, my sense is that, you know, we'll see, listen, tonight's election's a big election. I think there ought to be a lot of analysis of it. But my sense is it will be overdone as it normally is in terms of people want to say, because of this, this is what's going to happen in November. You know, let's let these things unfold.
Because we're running out of time, just quickly, has the press been fair in its treatment of the Obama administration?
I think so. I think they were in the campaign. By the way, the notion out there that somehow the media picked Barack Obama up on their shoulders and carried him to the Oval Office, I could not disagree more strongly with.
Fair enough. All right, we're going to go to internet questions, which I have two right here. Cheated. We got them before the forum started. The first one is from Gary Sales, and he asks, which I find a very interesting question, what does President Obama, you, and the Obama administration know now that you didn't know when campaigning for the presidency?
Well, I'm not in the administration, so
that's why I put you in there.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm more of an observer. I mean, I think, obviously, you know, when you're in the middle of a presidential campaign, it seems the hardest thing imaginable. But it pales in comparison, obviously, to what you deal with as president. And I think that, you know, but here's what I would say. You know, as you're dealing with the worst economic situation since the Great Depression, and some people thought we were heading into a Great Depression, and I think some of the actions he took helped steer us away from that. You're dealing with the need to deal with these pressing issues like healthcare and energy, which, by the way, are often treated as political footballs. They're anything but. They will help determine whether this country is as strong as we want it to be in 20 or 25 years. If you students inherit and help lead an America that is as strong competitively as we have been in the past. You're dealing with Afghanistan, winding down Iraq. You've got things like Haiti and the swine flu, tragedies that, you know, as I saw during the campaign, you know, he's got the right metabolism for this job, which is there's a calmness but a sense of urgency around these things. And he's a tremendous leader. And he's someone who I think can handle a lot of different things at one time, but also have his eyes fixed firmly on a horizon, okay? Which is what matters isn't the chatter on cable TV or the latest poll number, even an election. How are we going to get health care reform done? By the way, simply because he thinks that's the right thing to do for the country. Yeah. You know, he was that way in the campaign. You know, at our low moments, and we had a lot, yeah. You know, when you win, there's a mythology that arises around your campaign. Yeah. And we had a lot of challenges. But at those tough moments, he was at his best.
Should the political world be surprised that in some instances he's been willing to compromise against himself? For instance, the individual mandate, as you noted in your book, was something that you took great pride in not putting in your health care reform. The public option was in your health care reform platform. The Cadillac tax was something you attacked McCain mercilessly on, to be fully honest. Those are things that he's given away, essentially, for the benefit of getting health care reform passed. Should people be discouraged by that? Should they be encouraged by that? Is that part of the growing process of becoming president?
Listen, I think, you know, It'd be great if you could snap your fingers and get exactly what you'd like. But we have a legislative process. And it's a tough and difficult thing. But I think he's someone who, what he keeps focused on is, okay, are we going to reduce costs for government, businesses, and families? Are we going to increase coverage? Are we going to end insurance company abuses? And is healthcare reform going to be part of how we strengthen the economy and create jobs in the future?
Okay. Second.
And if we do that, then obviously, he's willing to entertain other ideas.
All right.
And has.
Second internet question from Randy Bernard. And I like this one too. Does President Obama plan to address what many people see as a problem with the out-of-scale influence of big money on our electoral representatives? As a reference, Dick Durbin saying banks own the place. How can you get stuff done with so many moneyed interests still affecting the legislative process? This is irrespective of your fundraising apparatus, which is very much bottom-driven.
It's bottom-driven, but look what he's already done. I mean, lobbyists, I think there was 2 waivers, cannot come work in the White House. More importantly, if you work in the Department of Energy, for the first time in American history, you can't leave and go work for ExxonMobil for the duration of the Obama administration. Every visitor to the White House released for the first time in history. No lobbyists on boards and commissions. Okay? These are huge changes that I think over time can help rebuild trust. What he's doing on health care, okay? Taking on the entrenched interests on banks, okay? And I think this is where people's cynicism, and this is one of the great battles we had in the campaign, to get first-time voters, young voters, people checked out of politics, to get them to vote. It wasn't because we didn't know who they were, where they lived. We were fortunate. It wasn't even that we didn't have the money or organization. The biggest barrier to the participation was cynicism. Mm-hmm. That even if they liked Barack Obama, they said, you know what, the game is fixed. But why wouldn't we're not going to get health care.
But why wouldn't you be cynical if, in the process of trying to pass Cramdown, the banks essentially killed the legislation? I mean, we're not talking about the Obama administration now. We're talking about Congress. And the prevalence of moneyed interests still seems to reign supreme there.
Well, I think he has done remarkable things and big changes in terms of transparency and lessening the influence of special interests and lobbyists in his administration, which he directly controls. Okay. I think the things he's tried to do legislatively have as well. Listen, I would argue that Congress, Democrats in Congress, ought to follow more of his lead. Because one, I think it's the right thing for the country. Secondly, I think it's the right kind of politics. Particularly when we won back the place in 2006, partially on the issue of ethics and reform and transparency.
And so, I mean, DNC, I believe, is not accepting lobbying donations, but the 2 other campaigns...
For the first, well, which, by the way, that's never happened before. It's the first time a political party in this country has never accepted contributions from lobbyists or PACs.
Should the 2 other campaign arms follow suit? You said they should take his lead.
Well, that's their decision to make, obviously. I happen to believe that the more we as a party are showing that it's about people for us, not just about our policies, which is most important, but also about the way we run campaigns, that's an effective thing.
All right, we're going to go to the mics. There are one right here, one right there. I guess I will be the one to call in the person on the mic. And since we only have one person, we'll go to you, sir.
Steve Kay from near Annapolis. I'm going to make a comment on the Republican Party, the energized base, and I'd like your comments back on that. I was a Republican all my life till 2004 or so when I understood what Bush was about. I'm playing repentant, or some repentance. And what I see is the real core base is the old Bible Belt South, an example of which was this horrendous thing that smiling Pat Robertson said about Haiti. They deserved it. I think that the Republicans are moving the whole political battle, and maybe the Democrats don't understand this, from a political battle to a religious battle where people's minds are frozen. That's why they've got all this energy and so forth.
We got to get to the question.
That's my comment. I'm asking what you, sir, think about that. Am I right? Am I off base or what?
Well, no, I don't think they're making a here's what I'd say, though. I do think, and again, I tend to look at things not in the context of, the next election, next month, just simply 2010 or even 2012. If you look at over the next, period of years, decade, let's say, loosely, I think we are positioned as a party to do very well electorally for the following reasons. One, I do think the Palin, Beck, Limbaugh wing of that party, particularly you look at their candidates in 2011, that's the gauntlet they're going to have to run. I think you've got the center of the electorate, independents, obviously are struggling economically. But I think as the economy continues to strengthen in every way that's meaningful, including jobs, I think we are going to be positioned because they do not respond well to that. And they respond well to leadership. And I think what the president and a lot of members of the party are going to do is some tough, hard things that have rebuilt this economy. The Republican Party, I think long term, again, race by race, this could differ. Long term, I think could have catastrophic problems continually with Hispanic voters, with African American voters, and with younger voters over time. And I think that has huge implications in the Electoral College as it relates to presidential races, but also in congressional and state elections. So I think the message of the Republican Party, which is largely, anger, it's a return to failed policies, it's sticking up for the banks and the health insurance companies. I think as things settle over time, as we're able to make the case, and again, politics is a comparative exercise, we're going to be in good shape. And again, I think there's a recipe out there. Every candidate in our party has to determine what's their pathway to victory. What's their pathway to victory? Is it, how much independent vote do they think they can get in their district or state? How much Republican vote can they shave off? How much Democratic vote are they in danger of losing? What's the turnout variables? Again, now, that's just one part of politics. Who you are, your values, your message. That's the external part and ultimately is probably more important. But you have to understand the numbers. Because a good election fought, if you don't get the 50% vote, is just that.
Okay, we got to go keep this process moving because there's so many people wanting to ask questions. Go ahead, sir.
I'm Adam Bink. I live here in D.C.
Speak a little louder.
I'm Adam Bink. I live here in D.C. I have two questions. You spent a lot of time talking about how Organizing for America has been very successful and what the Obama administration has done. I'm curious if there are, number one, anything that the administration and OFA could be doing better, and two, if so, what are they?
Well, there's always things you'd be doing better. I'm not going to necessarily share those here tonight.
Why not? People are watching on the internet.
Yeah, any organization can do better. I think that, with OFA we're learning a lot because this has never been done before, number one. Number two, in the campaign you have to understand we were an enormously muscular campaign, thousands of staff. We're a fairly skeletal enterprise now. Which is great about that in one respect is we are now much more reliant on our volunteers. We were hugely reliant on them in the campaign, even more so. And you're seeing this, we have people we call community organizers, much to Sarah Palin's chagrin, that are taking ownership in their community for OFA work, whether that's legislative work, campaign work, public service work. And they're running the thing, okay? And I think that's going to have great application down the line in terms of elections, but also in terms of strengthening community. So we've learned about what works and doesn't work. Listen, I think the president has had, under the circumstances, a remarkable first year. And I think that, weathering this economic storm and doing some tough things to help us stabilize and then ultimately grow. I mentioned some of the things he's done, I think, to rebuild trust in the executive branch as it relates to lessening the influence of lobbyists. You've got things like the Pay Equity Act that I think are very, very meaningful. I think he's reshaped and strengthened our relationship with the rest of the world that's going to pay huge dividends in the years to come. And so I think that, but it's a tough, listen, change is hard. I mean, he said this the night he won the election. This is going to be really, really hard. Really hard. But you have to understand, healthcare, energy, okay? If these problems were affecting your family or your business, you couldn't afford to kick them down the road year after year. We'll deal with it next year, after the next election, after the next decade, in some cases, after the next generation, okay? There is entrenched interest here. This is a city that tends to value short-term politics and analysis of that over, tough long-term thinking and action. And, what's hard about this on healthcare and energy, all of the benefits of them, they're not going to be apparent in the next election or even the one after that. But that's no reason not to do them. That's why they haven't gotten done. My view is this will be a successful time if we look back 20, 25 years from now in its full measure and say at that moment we rose up to the challenge and did the tough things that are going to strengthen us economically and as a society. Now, on health care, listen, right now the health care plan is seen as negatively as it could be. It passes, that begins to change, okay? Because this isn't going to be a spin war. Everybody, every American has an interaction with the health care system. So senior citizens are going to say, well, I was told I wouldn't be able to see my doctor anymore, or that my out-of-pocket was going to rise. Well, in fact, the donut hole's been filled. Sure. I was told that I could no longer see my doctor. I'd have to wait months for procedures. None of that's going to happen. And I think smart Republicans probably understand that.
Let's talk about smart Republicans. We'll go to an audience question in 2 seconds. Just quickly, you talked about the Sarah Palin, Glenn Beck wing of the Republican Party and the very strong likelihood that someone is going to be nominated out of that wing. Is there one Republican who you see is not of that wing that could be sort of electorally viable in this current incarnation of the GOP?
Yeah, listen, their primary will happen, and I'll observe it. I'm not going to offer predictions now.
What do you think of Sarah Palin as a Fox News contributor?
Well, you know, I'm sure she's going to get Boffo ratings. As a Democrat, I'm happy to have her out there. I wish her book tour would last for about 3 more years. So, you know, I think that, and listen, I'm not saying I just think the way, it's unlikely that in 2011, with this big caveat, a lot can change.
Yes.
But as things stand now, it's hard to see someone nominated doing well in the Iowa caucuses, in the South Carolina primary, without a lot of support in that wing of the party. And so, you know, that'll be an interesting dynamic to see unfold. Good
segue to, I'm going to get to you in a second. We have an internet, Twitter or online question, I can't tell. But it goes like this. The small and non-diverse electorate of Iowa made an Obama presidency possible. Is this fact healthy for democracy, or should there be a rotating first primary and or caucus?
Well, you know, we've been looking at this. A commission was set up at the DNC called the Change Commission to look at the calendar and some of the issues around the presidential primary process. I think particularly with the addition of South Carolina and Nevada, we've added diversity to the first 4. I think there's value in those first 4. I think it gives an opportunity for a candidate from the outside, even one not well-funded like us, you know, to have
not well-funded.
Well, meaning we were well-funded, much better funded than we thought, but a candidate who wasn't well-funded has an opportunity to do well and potentially win. So I think, and you've got, you know, African-American population of great numbers in South Carolina. You've got both African-Americans and heavy Latino population in Nevada. You've obviously got the Northeast and Midwest. I think it works.
You like getting rid of the superdelegates, which is a new proposal?
Yeah, what I think we ought to do is obviously our party leaders, our DNC members, they're important parts of our party. And I think that, you know, their role at the convention ought to be preserved. I think we as the Democratic Party ought to have the nomination outcome determined 100% by the voters. 100% by the voters.
Some applause for that.
Well, listen, you know.
So no more the entire delegate system? You want the superdelegates gone?
Superdelegates would still go. They'd have a vote, but it would be tied to election outcomes.
Okay.
You know, to have basically a party leader have an autonomous vote, you know, that actually means as much as the votes of 50 or 100,000 people out there, just doesn't make sense. It was established a long time ago. There was reasons for it. I don't think those reasons hold anymore. Well, listen, we should throw this open to the voters. And I think that's what we'll end up doing. Now, that party leaders obviously still will go to the convention. You know, they'll still have a vote, but it's not an autonomous vote, so to speak. Okay. You know, they'll still get to influence the presidential election by their own support. But I think what we have to do on the calendar is we don't want another situation where we have 22 states bunched up on the same day. Now, you can't dictate that, but through messaging, through education, through enhancements and enticements, try and get some spacing throughout the period, and also not have a period like Pennsylvania where you had 7 weeks between one and the other. There's a lot that can be done. Some states, and I think clusters of states, will look at regional primaries. You know, that will work in some cases, not in others. I think the Potomac primary here worked out quite well.
Well, for your campaign, yeah.
Well, for us, but, you know, it really allowed campaigns and candidates to spend a lot of time on the ground.
All right, we have to rush it up. We have 10 more minutes. We're going to do strict audience questions. Let's get them quickly. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Frank. I'm actually from Massachusetts. I won't ask you about the Senate race, but I saw this past summer that you had signed on to run our governor's re-election campaign. I was just wondering if you saw any sort of like political parallels between Deval Patrick and Barack Obama, because they ran on like the same message, and now they sort of find themselves in maybe a little more over their head than they thought, and how you plan to, or not maybe how you plan, I don't want to give away any secrets, but how you, want to try and help Governor Patrick.
Well, I'm not running his campaign. I helped him in '06, and I'll help him again as an advisor. I think what Governor Patrick has done, first of all, I would reject completely the notion that either of them are over their head. I think they're doing, and I think what Governor Patrick's doing is managing some tough circumstances, but at the same time laying a foundation in biosciences and education and healthcare that I think are going to set Massachusetts up very, very well for the future. And that's a debate that will happen next year in Massachusetts. And it looks like it'll be a three-way race, and each of the candidates will talk about both their records but where they want to go. And I think Massachusetts is well positioned, and I think it's his leadership. And tough things, again, things that have both short-term impact but also longer-term potential that good states, good countries do. You lay strong foundations. So, I will say, I write in the book, being involved in Governor Patrick's race, they did some really, I thought, cutting-edge stuff around online organizing and really believing in the ability for people not just to sign up and give money online, but take it deeper than that. And, that was instrumental in how we built the Obama campaign in the beginning.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi. My name is David Rosen. I'm a student at the Graduate School of Political Management. In the view of many people, the single biggest obstacle to passing Barack Obama's agenda is the filibuster. Is filibuster reform on the agenda of the Democratic leadership? And if not, can you please tell me why not?
I'm not a legislative expert and haven't really been involved in those discussions. I think it's, so this is more of an observation. I think clearly, the filibuster's role has changed over time in meaningful and profound ways that I don't think necessarily comport with how the founders designed it or leaders of the Senate designed it over time. So I know there's a lot of discussions about that. The Vice President spoke about it this weekend. What happens on that, I don't know. But I think it bears scrutiny and it bears study. And, whether or not, it fits the times we're in right now.
Would you personally like to see it removed?
Oh, listen, I honestly have not looked at it enough, so I'd really want to look at it and study it. And, obviously the filibusters played an important role at times through history. I would suggest the way it's used now probably, again, doesn't meet the intent or how it's been used historically. So, but I'll leave that to others who have more background on that.
All right. Let's get these last two quickly. Go ahead.
My name's Kyle from Indiana. Three things I'm going to be watching for by 2012. Do you foresee the end of the Defense of Marriage Act, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the passage of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act?
Well, obviously, the president has a record on a lot of those issues, has spoke to them both in the campaign and in this year. So, my hope and expectations is yes. Obviously, he's dealing with a lot of issues and a lot of pressing issues, those amongst them. When and how those decisions are made and progress is made, I don't know. But I have deep belief in his commitment to these issues and his belief that we'll be a better and just America if we make progress on them. And, I'd have confidence that, in the timeline you'd outlined, hopefully we'll make progress on them.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Erin Pangilinan. I'm with Philippine News. How optimistic are you, and I know you don't like predictions, but how optimistic are you in moving forward with legislation if healthcare reform passes, specifically comprehensive immigration reform, given that there is a divisiveness in the economic recession between U.S. citizens and the undocumented, even if there are record, high turnouts, voter turnouts in the Latino and Asian American community, which are seen as a swing voter constituency?
Well, obviously you've got healthcare, you've got energy, you've got financial reform, you've got Afghanistan, but you have a whole set of other issues that, are equally important. Immigration is an issue that, has not been dealt with effectively or properly at the federal level. As he said in the campaign, we are a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants, and he doesn't believe those things are in conflict. So we'll see, what kind of effort is put forth this year. I think that there's certainly some interest in that. But it's got to get done at some point, obviously. And, you know, you obviously have to deal with the enforcement side of it, as well as having a clear path to citizenship. We talked a lot about this in the campaign. I think this is hopefully an issue where, you know, you could get some agreement and cooperation from the Republicans. You know, it may be that their strategy through 2010, if not longer, is not to agree on anything. You know, I think they'll ultimately pay a price for that politically. More importantly, I think they should pay a price for that politically. Because, again, these aren't just political footballs. These are issues that are going to help determine the strength or not of our country and our people for a long time to come. So, you know, potentially that's an issue where you could get some cooperation. You'd hope on something like financial regulation, you could get some cooperation. Again, I think if the Republicans don't cooperate there, they're doing the wrong thing for the country, but also they're clearly sending the signal to the American people that they're taking the side of the big banks over our middle-class families and small businesses.
You seem a little, just to close this out, you seem quite surprised by this universal Republican opposition to the president's agenda. A lot of people think that the president's motto of changing the way Washington works was a bit rosy to begin with. They aren't surprised that Republicans are firmly opposed to his agenda. They expected it. Why didn't the campaign fully expect that they would get no GOP votes?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I mean, I think, you know, I'm not a Republican strategist, but if I were, I would not suggest that this is a long-term strategy for political growth. So I hope they continue to pat themselves on the back and, you know, celebrate, you know, temporary moments, because I don't think that long-term this is the way back to respectability with younger voters, with Hispanic voters, with African-American voters, long-term with independent voters who will determine elections in this country for a very, very long time. So I think what he can do is continue, okay, the efforts around lobbying and disclosure and reform. Huge progress and signals to the American people. Continue to talk to Republicans. Continue to reach out to them.
But how do you change the way Washington works in this environment?
You know, again, you can't wave a magic wand. You've got to keep trying. You've got to keep trying. And bit by bit, you know, we're in the middle of the NFL playoffs. This is not going to be an 80-yard strike, okay? This is going to be 2-3-yard gains. You can begin to make progress. And if you're consistent in tone and intention and approach, eventually I think you can make progress.
All right, I think we're not out of time. Okay. Okay, yeah, we'll take some more questions. We're not officially out of time yet. So go ahead.
Hi, Shayla Bezer with the Special Report with Brett Baer. Just to give you an update on the Massachusetts race, it looks like that obviously the polls are closed, but it looks like the preliminary results include, among those who decided how they would vote in the past few days, Coakley has a slight edge, 47-41. Now that
what's that based on?
That is coming out of the Rasmussen report conducted a survey of 1,000 voters.
Okay, well, we got to get to a question.
Anyway, the question that I have for you is that, you know, Obama administration, actually Obama campaign has been very successful in exciting voters, young, old, of all ages. It was that enthusiasm that brought a lot of people together. However, in the last election, last year, Democrats lost Jersey and Virginia as in governorships. Do you think that there's anything going on in the Obama administration, and the president has campaigned for both Democratic candidates? Is there anything amiss from the time when Obama campaign was run to the way administration is being run in terms of supporting Democratic candidates going forward?
No, listen, I think that you know, every election is unique. I think that, again, the Republican Party, there's a lot of energy in the Republican Party. I think as we look towards next November, where you're going to have races all across the country, with their unique factors. Democratic incumbents, Republican incumbents, governor's races are different than Senate races, congressional races have their own flavor. I think if we can show Democrats that we did some tough things on health care, on energy, stabilizing the economy, bringing the troops home from Iraq, we delivered on a lot of things he campaigned on and the Democrats campaigned on. I think that the best way we can get Democrats excited, to get first-time voters excited, to get young voters excited, is to have that kind of message and accomplishments to say, your vote mattered in 08. Your vote mattered. And what the Republicans want to do is in many ways opposed to all of our accomplishments and where we see the country headed. So the party out of power is always going to have a lot of energy. I think if we can deliver on the things we promised, I think we can have a lot of energy too. And again, I think politics are a comparative exercise. I think Virginia was always going to be hard. New Jersey had its own set of circumstances. You know, I think in Massachusetts, we'll see what happens. Win or lose, I think you have to say that the Republican Brown ran a great campaign. I'm a studier and observer of politics. He ran a very, very good campaign. And we'll see if it's enough. But I think that good candidates on their own, the atmospherics do matter. And if health care gets passed, if we can make further progress on energy, I think that's going to be a huge atmospheric lift to the Democratic base.
Well, let me ask
but that in and of itself is not enough. Because if you're running for governor or Senate in a state, you, the candidate, the campaign, has to take responsibility for saying, how am I going to make sure I'm communicating to those voters, reaching out to those voters? How am I organized to get them out? And how am I building relationship so they think something's at stake?
Learned the right lessons from the Obama campaign. I'd also like to know if you see any grassroots organizing going on out there, other than OFA, that's really creative and innovative.
Well, I'd say, listen, you know, back to my point about every campaign is unique, you know, our campaign was unique. You know, the movement that was built was not because we had the best website or the best staff or the best email program. It was built because of Barack Obama built a relationship with his supporters. That can't be manufactured or replicated. You know, some people would say, well, why didn't Hillary Clinton run the campaign you did? She couldn't, okay? That's not a fair criticism. She didn't have that available to her like we had it. And so I think that campaigns, now I'd say this, the belief in people that grassroots volunteers aren't just additive, like, well, you know, we'll see what we have for them to do, or we'll make sure that all of our voter ID and our GOTV and our persuasion is covered with paid staff and paid vendors, and then the volunteers are bonus. I think that's the wrong approach. Volunteers can be at the heart and soul of your campaign, because nothing's more effective than a neighbor talking to a neighbor. Okay? Two, that in the world we live in today, if you are not very focused on how you are campaigning in and utilizing the digital space, you're making a huge mistake. Because so many people of every ethnic group, age group, income group is spending an enormous amount of their time, not just online anymore, but on their mobile devices. So are you running a campaign that's consistent with how they're spending the rest of their lives? And so I think those are some lessons from our campaign that I think travel across. But, you know, other lessons, not so much. I do think another lesson is Barack Obama talked to the voters like adults. He was willing to get beyond the sound bites, and I think that was deeply impactful to voters, and it remains so. But, you know, not everybody can run the kind of campaign we ran, and everyone's got to step back and say, okay, who am I? What's my message? What am I offering? What's my opponent offering? And what's my best theory to get to 50%? But I do think that, listen, volunteerism was, unfortunately, kind of a dying thing in politics in many respects. I think we helped rekindle it. I hope that remains the case. And by the way, you know, what the Tea Party folks are doing, I'm never going to criticize anybody for organizing. I still don't think that there's tremendous strategic organizing going on. I think that they're very good at creating headlines and gathering attention. And there's a lot of energy there. And we as Democrats should respect that energy. You know, the question is, can it take the next step into really strategic organizing?
And you don't think it can?
Well, I don't know. It remains to be seen. I don't think it has yet. Okay. But I'm not going to sit, you know, we'll see. It's an open question.
All right, we have time. Okay, we're done, I guess, basically, is the message. Although there's so much left to ask. But anyways, I want to thank the Progressive Book Club for hosting this event. Thank you for showing up and talking to us. Thank you all.
Thank you.